and welcome to Plot Twist Radio.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on. I'm really looking forward to being here.
It's great to have you. Before we get going, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. My name is Terrence Rotering. Grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Did 39 years in the Air Force. Retired. Thought I was just going to run around in the mountains here with my dogs. And then something happened, and I became an author. And so I've written 11 books in the last 2 years, and I've basically 4 trilogies, and I've got 3 more planned. I'm writing the 5th one right now, and it's just blown up into this massive multiverse. So that's kind of the plot twist for this one, is just all the technical stuff for 4 decades in the Air Force flying jets. Up here, you can see them. And then decided to be an author, and now we're rolling. And I can't imagine not having ever done this in my life.
Now, my sons, I have to start here. They're addicted to planes. We just went on a flight and it got a little bumpy. And ever since we got back on Earth, they've been obsessed with planes. So I had to point that out really quick.
Little boys, all boys should be obsessed with planes, and girls too. I don't want to be that way. So,
of course, yes, we have a couple of museums we're going to hit soon because we're in the plane thing right now. But I don't want to get too far off. I just had to point that out really quick. So you said that you've written quite a few books in the past 2 years. And I noticed for me, when I first started writing, I couldn't stop. So I'm assuming it's probably similar for you.
very similar. Yeah, I never intended on being an author, obviously, with my career, but I wrote a couple of books about 15 years ago for my boys, just to let them know, hey, you're reading books, you can have a voice too. So you can write. Dad wrote a book, and it was just for fun. And then it sat for 15, 20 years until 2024. And then I rewrote those. And I said, well, I'll just make it a trilogy and finish it with Forever. The first 2 were The Faithful Stand. And it's got a nice ring to it, The Faithful Stand Forever. And then it took about a week, and I was kind of hooked. And so I had to do a prequel trilogy, and then I had to do another one that'll probably get into the questions, but just blew it up into 7 different universes, a multiverse, if you will, 7 different planets. And then this 4th one that I just sent in last week collapses it back down to Earth, and it just unfences the fiction and makes it pertinent to all of the people, the readers, where they realize they're actually in the same fight as the characters, and they have all the tools to fight that. And so it brings them in. And then for the last 2, for the last 3, it'll all of us will be involved in the story, if you will.
Very cool. So what was the spark that started these stories?
Yes, the first book was just there for the boys. The second one, 5 years later, doing a prequel, because I threw a bunch of stuff in there because it started out fantasy. And I'm like, oh, stones and, these different things. And I was like, well, I don't want to be that guy that just kind of makes stuff up and makes it, and you just have to accept it. I want to explain it. So I did that prequel, and then that kind of blew it into some sci-fi. And so all of a sudden I'm like, okay, is multiple genres going to work? And I said, well, it's fiction. Why should they tell me that I have to stay in a stovepipe of one particular genre if I can make this work? And so it blew up into some sci-fi. And then the third one, after the Foundation Chronicles, which was the second trilogy, became the Chronicles of the Seven Wheels. And that really blew up into sci-fi, because now all of a sudden you've got time travel and tesseracts and black holes and time dilation, photon entanglement, all of these different things that not only the 14-year-olds can enjoy, but the physicists can look and go, hey, what's he talking about here? And does this really work? And all that artificial intelligence, all of the things that aliens, all the things that we're into now, and going, what's the deal with this stuff? So I did that. And then this 4th one, again, after every trilogy, Erin, I'm like, oh, I'm done. And then it's like, wait a minute, no, I'm not. And that gets into these God wing things, which are kind of these spiritual aspects that kind of keep me going, which is really some interesting things there. But then this 4th one, yeah, I was having a second granddaughter, and I had put my first granddaughter into the 3rd trilogy, and I'm like, and that kind of, I guess I got to do more, because she's going to grow up and go, wait a minute, how come, Grandpa didn't put me in? And so I had to do this one, and it became, instead of doing 3 separate books trilogy, I put all 3 books into one bigger one, 900 pages. So all of a sudden now we've got, 11 to 14 books, depending on how you look at it, 10,000 years of time, 7 different, one massive multi-dimension with 7 different worlds, and all 3 genres. So it's something for everybody. Some people don't like, the sci-fi. Some people don't like fantasy. Here's a chance for people to go, hey, wait a minute, this kind of works. And when you have the leeway of all these different places and times, you can make anything work, basically. So I forget what the original question was, but hopefully I covered it. I probably did, because I tend to just blah, blah, blah.
Hey, I love it. I love it. So the series, like you said, it evolves from fantasy into science fiction and time travel, which is one of my favorite tropes, I guess we would say.
Yeah.
I think that there needs to be more of that out there. For whatever reason, I've noticed when I talk to like literary agents, they're like, I don't want to touch time travel. And I'm like, please touch time travel. Those are my favorite. So I love that you went with that as well. What challenges came with blending those genres together? Because, you know, like you said, that it's not too common to go with multi genres, but I personally prefer it.
Yeah, so people often ask me that, and it hasn't actually been that hard. It seems like I've been reporting on the story. It really, truly does. Because, like I said, I didn't plan on doing this. It just kind of hit me. I think when you have a purpose, and all those years in the Air Force and my whole life, basically, I've kind of had a mission and a purpose. And I think that's what kind of drove me into writing because when I retired, I was like, what am I going to do now? I don't want to just be worthless and just grow old and die. So the spiritual warfare aspect involved with those other two is really important to me. And I think that's what's been driving me forward, just because that is my purpose. I have something to say there, my mission, if you will. So I don't want to be preachy in the books. And that's kind of one of the big challenges is not to be preachy, just let the characters speak. You got two big chessboards there, and the whole thing is around good versus evil. The kings on the chessboards are basically God and Satan. And then you got all of the different rooks and knights and bishops and the queen and the pawns, all of these different players in different times and different places fighting that battle, and with the big guys in the background behind it with angels and demons, and that's all the spiritual part. So that's probably maybe 20%, and then 30% fantasy and 50% sci-fi is the way it's kind of turning out right now. And that obviously just reflects my interests in books and movies and everything else. So the challenge is, I've got guys like that just show up for a sentence or two in like the third book, and then they've got half the book on them in the seventh book. So the challenge is really keeping all of these characters, all of these themes, the arcs, and then the overall theme and the overall arc of the entire series kind of going in the right direction kind of thing. But it's kind of easy, right? With good versus evil. So, and that's why I kind of identify a lot with Tolkien and Lewis and Decker and Peretti, those guys, because it's kind of a mix of that stuff. And then every other movie that I've watched, in my entire 63 years of life, probably starting at 10 or so, and all the books that I've read. So it has something again for everybody, but the challenge is just keeping everything straight. And now, after 4,000 to 5,000 pages, depending on how you count it, it's like sometimes I have to go back and use not AI to help me write or anything, but can you find where this guy was instead of me digging through all my books kind of thing? So in that way, that's been kind of helpful.
Oh yeah. And you bring up a really good point with sequels. Like for me, I'm in the middle of one right now, and it is such a challenge. I think that for me, writing the additional books are harder than the original book. Do you see it kind of similarly?
Yeah, because you got to keep everything straight, right? And unlike really good authors like yourself and the ones that I've mentioned before, I'm not really into the flowery language and spending 20 pages on this is the way the forest looked while she was sitting on the bench. If I will, to pat myself on the back at all, it's just the complexity of the story, just keeping everything straight, just the multiverse that I've created, that kind of thing. So I really like that aspect of it. And if I will, can I jump into the Godwinks real quick?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So when I was writing the third book, and this is kind of what drove me into the second and to continue on, and I should also say that there's no sexual stuff in the books and there's no bad language, but there is, when evil's doing dark things, there's some dark stuff to talk about, and it's not like really gross or anything, but so that's why I recommend it for like 14 and up, just because, we don't know how kids are going to deal with all that stuff. But so anyway, so I was writing the third trilogy and it was called Forever. And I needed a place. I had a place on my map. I had written a bunch of it for the book. And I needed a place where, people were sacrificing their children over a fire to a demon, right? And so I said, well, I don't have a name for this place. And I said, what if I just take the first letter of each of the other places I introduced in 2005 and 2010 in the first two books that I rewrote, and then the new place that I put in Forever. I said, okay, and it ended up spelling Tophet, Tophet. And I was like, wow, the letters and everything are in the right place. I don't even know what that means, but that sounds cool. So I put it on the map, and then a couple days later, and the hair on the back of my neck all stands up when I tell this story because it's. So I look it up. And Google comes back and says, yeah, it's a place in ancient Israel in the Valley of Hinnom where a sect of Israelites were sacrificing their kids over a fire to a demon called Moloch. And I'm like, okay. So when I tell other people that story, they go, well, maybe you knew that way back in 2005 or something. I'm like, I never even planned on doing a second book. or a third book that was 15 years later. And then I put these different places, Trinian, Omentia, Parlantis, Heath, just pulled them out of my ear, just coming up with names without any research or anything. And so for that, then 20 years later to spell out a place that I'd written in the book, and then have it be what actually happened in the real world, that blew me away. And so there's been a bunch of things we don't have time to talk about, unfortunately, but a bunch of things like that that have continued to push me on in this series that I go, something's happening here. I'm not saying, I'm this is all true or something crazy like that. But somehow, and I'm a big believer, so I'm like, maybe God's just inspiring me to continue writing this because I have truth in it, good versus bad and all that kind of stuff. So that was just one of the neat little God winks, I call them, that kind of gets me going and keeps me going.
I love that. And that honestly sounds like one of those divine intervention things where, I obviously work in the paranormal field. And a
Right.
lot of times people ask me, does that make you not believe in God or whatever? I was like, no, it makes me far more likely to believe in God because you get all these like moments where
Yeah.
there's a reason for it. And there was a reason for you to come up with that name. And not only that name, what actually happened there. That's quite eerie. I get the feeling too. I know what you're talking about.
And I think that's maybe what drove me to start thinking of breaking down the fourth wall and making, unfencing the fiction kind of thing, because a lot of what's been happening is kind of unfencing the fiction for me personally. And so I decided to do that for the reading audience too, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of shift over to writing process because everyone's got a process. I am a pantser. A lot of people are plotters. How about you?
Yeah, for me, it's like walk with the dogs, come up with these incredible ideas, talk them into my phone, to record them, and then start talking with characters back and forth and see where they lead me, and then get back, throw it on the computer and fix it. And then let it sit while I write all of the other chapters that way. So basically, I would kind of think of it as a maze where when you're a kid, you work backwards to get where you are. So I would go, here's where I want to end with this book. And so I'm just going to write some names of chapters, just kind of come up with them and go backwards to where I am now. And then I can just jump in and it can change as much as I want it to as I'm going. But I'm just going to like look at that name of that chapter that day and go, okay, let's write about that. And so I end up with all of these chapters. And then it's so exciting because after a couple months, I go back and I start reading it again after I fixed it a little bit on editing. And I'm like, wow, I wrote that. Oh, that's really cool. And the stuff connects. And it's like reading a story almost that somebody else wrote because you only spent like that day on that chapter and then you just continue to go on. So obviously you fix that and that becomes the book. In this last one, because of what we talked about how complicated it's getting, I've kind of, for the first time in 2 years, I've spent like 3 weeks not writing at all. It's just been in the planning, organizing, setting up the chapters. So something has shifted a little bit, but every time I go on that walk or I go on that drive, I always have a pen or paper or the phone, because that's when all of the ideas hit me when I'm doing something else. So that would be some advice that I'd give to writers, maybe. Start with a purpose. Don't sit down, and everybody's different. Some people love doing this, so I don't want to tell you not to do it. But don't sit down at the keyboard and just like stare at the blank page and go, oh my goodness, what am I going to write? Just kind of think about it while you're doing something else, and it lets your brain relax while you're doing that other thing, walking the dogs, driving, whatever. And it takes away that anxiety part, and all of a sudden, all these ideas start coming. At least that's the way it works for me.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So you kind of alluded to this a little bit just a moment ago, but was there ever a moment when a character or storyline surprised you or even changed the direction of the series?
Yeah, that happens like all the time. So again, without ever planning on, a specific story and having it, a lot of people have for 20 years I've been, writing the story thinking about, no, not me. I mean, I think it's because I'm starting with these bigger thoughts, the good versus evil and having these bigger concepts. So it's not so much about a particular character, and I've got so many major characters in the different books. There's way more than those behind me there. And so I think just that being the driving force of having something to say in that bigger concept, if you will, makes it a lot easier for the characters to breathe in the story and just interact. And I really let them, it sounds kind of funny because I know it's my own subconscious, but I let the characters kind of bring me down the road, down the path to where they want to go. That and that paranormal stuff. I'm going to fit it in one more really quickly. So another big thing for me on the paranormal, the spiritual side is John 3:16. So I've got two passages that drive the whole book, the spiritual side of it. John 3:16, God loves us, sent his son to save us, and that's great. And then I don't want to demean it by that, but that, some people don't want to hear too much about that, so I don't want to over dwell on it. And then Job 19:25 through 27, I know that my Redeemer lives, and I'm so excited waiting for that to happen, paraphrasing, of course. So what's neat about those is, so for 2 years while I was writing this book, I'd wake up in the morning because I can only sleep. Since I've been writing this, I can only sleep, Aaron, for 3 to 4 hours a night tops. I get up and I start working, and it's just like, I don't know, I can't sleep. So I get up, I've been waking up and it's usually around 3 o'clock and I go, oh, there's the clock, says 3:16. Take a picture, put John in front of it, post it on Facebook. Was doing that for years. And then all of a sudden, the first, second book comes out and it comes back from the publisher and I didn't plan this and they do all their work and stuff. And it's like 316 pages. Okay, cool. How much did it cost for that book? Well, I had this piece of gold and because I was self-publishing and I was like, how much, can I get right now for this piece of gold online? And this guy's like, well, it's changing all the time, $2,316. And I'm like, okay. And then I was like, I'm gonna give all my first review on what is it? I can't remember the name of the site right now. Goodreads, I think, is like the lady. It was the 316th review. I'm like, something's happening. And then I'm like, I'm going to give all the proceeds from these books to this church we're building east of the Springs, and all these delays during COVID and the city and all this stuff. And it opens up on March 16th. 316. And so these things continue to happen. And the only reason I really had to bring it up is because this last book that I just sent in, I told you about my second granddaughter, right? And I was waiting for when she was going to be born. And then my son would tell us the name because they wanted to hold on to the name until after she was born. So when is she born? There's your quiz question. That's last year in the spring, March 16th, 316. I'm like, what? And then I kind of had an idea it might happen, but they didn't plan it. And then I wrote the whole book, and it's the spiritual side of it, in the series is these stones that have been around forever. What are they about? And they're the fruit of the spirit stones. So they're gifts of God kind of thing. And I'm waiting. And then they tell us her middle name is Thea. And I'm like, Thea, what is that name? I've never heard that name before. And I look it up and it means gifts of God. And I'm like, okay, this can't be happening because I couldn't have picked a better name. So all of these things continue to happen, and there's many more. Those are just the ones off the top of my head. But again, it's just really weird. So it kind of gets into the hauntings thing, although I believe it's a little more God originated.
Yes, yes, for sure. That is very interesting. That's
Yeah.
way more than coincidences. So, what did writing this and these experiences teach you about your own faith then?
Well, yeah, it continues to support the faith. And, I tried, like I said, I try not to be preachy, but I think, one thing that really separates these books from a lot of the books that are out there in fantasy or spirit or science fiction is just that, you probably know this because you have kids. There's some things you don't want them to watch on TV, even though they might be really cool shows, and that you and your husband probably even are watching, and you're going, feeling a little guilty about watching this. This isn't really good. So, there's a lot of that out there, and there's a lot of hopelessness and despair with the sci-fi stuff, and there's no God, or God is bad, or they sneak in like, Eastern mysticism with this wheel of time that continues to turn forever, or maybe some magic in the occult and stuff. And I'm not saying, all that stuff that, a lot of that I call sugar, when we're reading literature and stuff. That's a lot of the sugar, the entertainment, the adventure, all those different aspects, but I got a lot of meat and potatoes and good vegetables in my series kind of thing. So when you're done with it, you're not left with despair. It's not the world, the universe is hopeless. There are answers. There is help. This is the big thing. If anybody gets anything from these books, I want them to get every particular person is special and unique. They are loved, and there are answers. So unlike a lot of that other stuff, I'm trying to be positive with my stuff, my sci-fi and fantasy, because with that spiritual aspect. And I just personally can't see, and this is just me, I can't see because I'm older, right? I'm older. I don't want to waste my time that I have left and other people's time on just sugar, because when they're done with it, they're done with it. You watch the Tom Cruise movies or whatever, and you're driving down the road afterwards, or you feel like you're flying a plane or whatever, and that lasts for 30 minutes maybe, and then it's over. Yeah, it was a good movie. I had fun, but I want to give people something that actually lasts for their whole life kind of thing. I want them to know this battle that they're in, the war they're fighting, and that they have all the tools to fight it. And most of all, like I said before, they're special, unique, and loved. So
Very, very well said. So, where can the audience find you and your series?
yeah, so if you've got video right now, you can see my name down there. If you put that in Google, It'll show up. I'll read it real quick just for people that may not have, just have the audio or can't see anything. Not that they're blind or anything. Sorry. Yeah, Terrence Rotering, Terrence, and then Rotering, Rotering. If you put that in a Google or any kind of search engine, you'll come up with where you can get the books. They're all on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all that stuff. Also, my website, chroniclesoftrinian.com. And I've started dabbling with making movies, trailers, which is so cool. Another thing with AI, right? You can make all these book trailers and so that's awesome. But anyways, so all that stuff's on there. Podcasts are on there. My email's on there. People can send me questions. I'll answer all of their questions about the books or whatever. And then, yeah, so I'm just going to continue to do this and waiting for, the big day when, Amazon or Netflix or something says, you know what, this would be a great super fiction, and sci-fi and spiritual warfare kind of set of books, set of movies and shows for years that could go on their platforms, kind of thing. Because we have like 2 billion Christians in the world, let alone all the other people that would enjoy it too. And it's kind of the Wheel of Time or the Game of Thrones kind of thing for Christians. So I'm just hoping for that or some publisher to go, you know what? I know you self-published, but I also know that nobody has seen your books. So when we go to release and stuff, it's not going to be a big deal because it's not going to ruin it. And you've got all these books written, and so we know you can continue to write books. So yeah, so that's what I'm waiting for. And I know I kind of snuck that in there on you, Erin. So apologize.
No, you're fine. That you have the perfect series for those kind of probably like a docu-series, mini-series, that kind of thing. And they're so big on those right now. I binge watch one after the other. People really want that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, you definitely have the setup for it. But I will make sure all of your links are in the show notes. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It was well worth the wait, and God bless you on your works and your family and everything, and continued success for you.